Tulsa and Irvine. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves about is that we do have a very vast, diverse coalition of congregations that are in our membership, from the conservative to the very liberal, and it's bringing them together on issues that really matter to all of us, and working together to make sure that we're tackling things like homelessness, human trafficking, and just being there for one another. So one of the few things that we do actively is when we do hear about hate crimes or hate incidences, that we show up. It is so important for us to be there. When Wisconsin attacks happened at the Sikh Gurdwara, we made sure our membership was out there at the Sikh temple, welcoming them when they came for prayers. Because there is this fear of showing up and wondering what will happen. And we need to be there to let people know that it's going to be okay and that we're there for you. Same thing with Beth Jacob in Irvine. Same thing with the Islamic Center. So many things happen throughout our years that it's just being there and having that presence makes a huge difference. And if that's one thing that we can do to make people feel more comfortable, more safe, then that's the first step. And the second step is having those dialogues, those uncomfortable conversations of what actually is happening. What is the root cause of the hate that we're seeing right now? How do we get people to come to the table and have those conversations? And when we do have those conversations, we have roundtable discussions all the time, because we do have monthly luncheons. And one of the things that I've noticed over and over again is when you put two people that are totally different from one another at a table, just having a conversation, it changes their outlook. It changes their perceptions that they came in with, and then they go out more knowledgeable, more accepting of one another. And that doesn't mean that they are going to be best of friends, but then they have that respect that builds up. And that is very important. It's one thing to, get to know people, but just having respect for other people is huge. And when we lose that respect for one another, we see our moral compass basically diminishing. And so I think our job here is to make sure those dialogues are continuing, that we are continuing to show up, and that we're continuing to let people know that we're in this together.
My name is Eduardo Moreno. I'm here with Roberta representing the working group Welcome the Stranger, and it's just an interesting story how we came together. I work for St. Joseph Health Mission Hospital in community benefit, helping communities manager, and we were thinking about always with the lens of a healthy community, and we were really concerned about the poor and the vulnerable, and so we came together. Maybe that this is something that can be a learning experience for people who are not, we don't come from the, Roberta comes from the faith base. I represent a Catholic ministry, which is a non-profit hospital, Catholic hospital. But we came together in a humble way to explore ways to start the dialogue. We were really concerned about the most vulnerable, underserved people in South Orange County, and we were thinking about homeless. We're thinking about undocumented communities who are at the verge of any circumstances. And I don't have to spend a lot of time on how an undocumented person can be vulnerable. But some of the pieces, I'm relentless with the idea of committing to the poor and the vulnerable, and being an advocate, bringing always the hard questions to wherever I am in my meetings, and also explore those opportunities to collaborate, to be in community. In South County, it's so interesting. I've been working here for 10 years, and we always felt, or I felt, that we were lonely in this approach to be caring for the low income. We always thought that we will have a lot of people opposing, even just talking about the poor or talking about the homeless. And then suddenly we were finding that there were several groups discussing and talking, and then I come on a Saturday and I see all of you. So we have been applying that, is trying to meet everyone, the groups, the people who are ready, the people who are in the middle, and perhaps opening the dialogue to the others that we don't know yet. And one piece that at a personal level, and how I felt when I have been pretty vulnerable in the place where I live in the city of Orange, and in my experience there, in a there is a lot of ideas of the American way, all this Americana idea that the beginning of the century looked like in a certain way. Even just walking there, I just wanted just to be the nice person, be an instrument of peace, just being the not threatening to anyone, and meet my neighbor, not knowing what was their party affiliation or what they were thinking about me. It's just being active and honest and engaged. So those are my thoughts for me.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Rabbi Rick Steinberg, and I really wear two hats here. One is I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Orange County Human Relations Commission, who has three responsibilities: conflict resolution in our county, police community relations, and most importantly, the reporting and trying to eliminate hate crime in Orange County. I'm also Jewish. So those are the two hats that I wear. And the question is, how do I use my personal agency? And I would say that from the top down and from the bottom up is the best way to do that. And I have two things I would like to say to demonstrate my personal agency. I want to begin by acknowledging how great the city of Irvine is. Today is a representation of the things they care about. I hope it's not a violation of the Brown Act, but we have the whole city council and the mayor of Irvine here today, and that is really worthy of acknowledgement. We also have our assistant police chief, Julie Engen, who is here as well. Again, the police so involved. Now, with that buttering up, I want to ask and tell you that since the swastika incident in Newport Beach, Costa Mesa High School District, Newport Harbor High School District, I, every day since that time, have received at least one phone call, and some days two, parents telling me about their children experiencing anti-Semitism in school. The most vivid example is a fifth grader, Jewish boy walking down the hall with five girls, fifth graders, not really knowing what they're doing, standing at attention doing the Heil Hitler sign. The teacher, God bless the teacher, so wanted to do something, and so she said, "Students, stand up and tell everybody what happened." That's not the way you handled that situation. Went to the vice principal, lovely 24-year-old with brand new master's degree, didn't really understand what was going on. The principal, God bless this principal's soul as well, really well-intentioned, but doesn't really want to get involved doing hate programs and anti-hate programs. Everybody's so afraid. And so I'd ask our city council to really think about funding and encouraging our school board to fund anti-hate programs in every school in the city. It's about $2,000 per program. I don't know how many schools we have in Irvine, but my guess is we could probably afford that. And that way the vice principal and the principal don't have to stand alone and make the decision. The highest elected leaders will take a stand. We don't stand for hate. And so I would highly encourage that. OC Human Relations Council has a great program. ADL has a great program. There are many programs from which to choose. And I will use my personal agency to bring that to you at the appropriate time. So thank you. That's one agency. The second agency is, after the swastika incident, I was in touch with 3 of the teenagers who were at that party. Just so happened the calendar worked to my advantage, because that next Friday night, I was having a Sabbath dinner in my home for teenagers who belonged to my synagogue. And so, in talking to these 3 students who were deeply remorseful, 2 of them didn't really understand what they were doing. One said, "Rabbi, I'm 15 years old and it's my first high school party." I had no really sense of how hateful this was. So I brought them to the synagogue first, showed them the Torah, the scripture in the scroll form that was saved from the Holocaust. I explained how, for Jewish people, that symbol represents the death of relatives, as if it were your own relative. That's how powerful it is. These 3 young women came to my home, nervous and courageous though they were. Each spoke. I said to my students when they said, "How many of you ever done something dumb?" They all raised their hand. "How many of you ever done something really dumb and it went viral across the world?" Like, this is the incident at this party. And they went on to say how remorseful they were, how this dinner and going to the Holocaust Museum and singing the Torah and all these things will make them the best anti-hate and anti-Semitic people around. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They will fight anti-Semitism with all their heart, with all their soul. Sadly, the young woman also said that there were other people at that party who were not remorseful. So much so, it just so happened, again, the quirk of the calendar, Anne Frank's stepsister happened to be in town that same week and met with all the students who were there. And this is third hand, so I wasn't there, but one of the students reported to me that one of the students said, "What's the big deal? It was just a joke." The last thing I want to say, and then I'll pass it to the pastor, is that we abdicate our responsibility to the teachers and the principals, as I just did to the city council, so forth and so on, and it really has to start in the home. But clearly, it's not happening. It's not happening. So we have to do something collectively from the top down and from the bottom up. And so if we can touch one soul, that's one more soul that might have a different perspective of the pain these symbols cause, whether it's for the gay community, whether it's for the Muslim community, whether it's for the African American community, the Jewish community, the immigrant community, the Latina community. Hate is pretty rampant right now, and we have to do everything we can to tamp it down. Thank you.
For those who would like a little more information about Christ Our Redeemer, we have free books in the back. Wonderful paraphernalia that you can take home and then come back and participate with our church. Amen. Thank you, Assemblyman. Thank you, Michael, for this opportunity to sit within the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Our mission is to minister to the social, spiritual, and physical needs of believers. Unlike some denominations, unlike some churches, our mission is to deal with social justice. That's what we do. We have been doing social justice work since 1787. It was in that year that we wanted to pray at the altar at a Methodist church called St. George Methodist Church. And we walked down in Philadelphia and we went to pray, and some not so informed, not so spiritual, not so holy whites walked down to the altar and literally snatched these Africans from their knees and told them, "You are not allowed to pray in this church." It was then that we walk out of the St. George Methodist Church and we walk into a blacksmith shop. And in that blacksmith shop we had worship, and we've been worshiping ever since. The African Methodist Episcopal Church now has almost 3 million members and 7,000 churches around the world. We own 7 universities, and Christ Our Redeemer is the largest African Methodist Episcopal Church in Orange County. I don't know if that's saying a lot, but that's come on. So our responsibility is our 3,700 members here. Our responsibility is to listen, love, learn about some of their challenges. What do you do when a 12-year-old boy says, "I was cut the other day by a white student on my arm, and then he called me the N-word"? And I go and meet with the teacher, and the teacher said, "It's all his fault." At Woodbridge. What do you do when the N-word is spelled out on the wall of where you live in Coda de Casa? What do you do? What do you do when your gay members say, "I was put out of this other church, but the Bible says you ought to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, and thy mind. You ought to love your neighbor as you love yourself"? And the challenge is there are some who believe that they have a right to create an atmosphere of fear to silence you. We are the African Methodist Episcopal Church. We will not be silenced, and we must learn to love one another because God loves us. So our responsibility is not to be afraid of anybody. By the way, the African Methodist Episcopal Church owns this building. Amen. We don't lease this building. So those who we like to be here will stay here. Those who we don't like to be here will be asked to leave. Somebody give God praise. So my point is that while we are unapologetically in love with God's creation, we must foster the movement of Dr. Martin Luther King that suggests that we must be community changers, and that was our motto for so many years, but now we've created what we call the beloved community. In the beloved community, Dr. Martin Luther King says, racism, sexism, homophobiaism, poverty, unemployment, and all of the other isms are not tolerated. Why? Because we are all kin under the skin. Believe it or not, we all bleed the same color. And the problem is there are some dinosaurs on the earth that actually believe that they are superior to somebody else. And we would suggest that maybe they need to go back into an extinct place and realize that nobody has the right, amen, in the 21st century to hang, to curse, to ostracize, to silence the way they did during Jim Crow, during the thoughts of slavery. Why? Because we've all been created free in God's eyes. So we close with this. When we were having challenges with police all over the country, and Sheriff Hutchins was then responsible for the policing department of Orange, I called her along with Rusty Kennedy, and we formed what we called the Interfaith Coalition. And we would sit down and we would talk about the challenges of implicit bias. We would talk about the challenge of some dinosaurs that saw color instead of character. We talked about how police are also profiled based on their uniforms that they wear. And that dialogue continued for how many years now? I think in the last 3 years?
It goes still, yeah.
Still goes. And just last week, there were over 100 pastors meeting, and Rabbi and I had an opportunity to talk. One of the shining points that came out of that was while Milwaukee was having almost these close to riots against the community and the police, God gave me a vision. God said, why don't we have a march of solidarity? Because we have more in common than we have in contrast. And I called Sheriff Hutchins, I called the chief of police here in Irvine, and I said, is it possible that we can bring black, white, Latino, Asians, gay together with the policing departments of Orange County? And they said, yes, just do it. And last summer after that, we were able to bring a coalition of almost 7,000 people together here in Irvine. And we started marching down the street. And as we were marching, people were literally coming out of office buildings, pulling over on the side of the street, asking what's going on here in Irvine, right there on Irvine Center Drive. And we said this: when you look at the rainbow of God's creation, police walking together, elected officials walking together, churches walking together, synagogues, mosques walking together, gay, straight walking together, all of God's people walking together, we said that's how heaven will look. Why? Because heaven does not discriminate based on color, age, or sexism. It does not discriminate until we begin to realize that heaven is fully integrated. Then we will begin to live in harmony in all God's creation. Thank you very much. I approve this message.